Ladies, are you ready for some real talk? The Achievers Unfiltered podcast isn't a bunch of fluffy stuff about career fashion or networking do's and don'ts. It's real heart-to-heart conversations with inspiring leaders. It's from women, by women, and for women. Tune in for a panel discussion on today's hottest topics that women face every day. We'll also discuss things that rarely enter the conversation. Subscribe to the Achievers Unfiltered podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Hello, hello.
Hey.
It is Achievers Unfiltered at Second Soul Studios, and I have you two fabulous women as my guests. Introduce yourselves.
My name is Sharon Fekete. So good to be here.
Yeah.
And I'm Sophia McDaniel. Pleasure to be here too.
Wonderful. I'm very excited about our topic. It's something when I first heard the word, I did not know what it was, and it is face validity.
Yes.
And Sophia, I would love for you to talk about it because it was in our meeting, our Achievers meeting, that it was brought up. And a lot of people kind of looked around the room and thought, ooh, what is that? And you explained it perfectly. And I guarantee most of the people listening are going to know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we were in the meeting and we were talking about mental health topics. And I immediately thought about face validity, especially in context of the chamber. So face validity was this topic that came to me, and it is this idea that if you are this working professional, male or woman, but usually it happens amongst us women because we have this role to play, so to say, in society. We're dressing up, we're going to these events, whether it's the chamber or we're going into our own work events. And it's this perception that if you have everything put together, whether it's physical or it's this, beautiful speaking ability or this ability to close deals or be brilliant at your job, that for some reason, if you have all these things put together, that you're not able to be hurting on the inside, or maybe you're not able to be, suffering from depression or anxiety. So face validity is really this idea of you, because you have everything put together on the outside, that there's no way that you're, hurting, or you're less likely to be hurting from these things. So we're less likely to be heard when we go to a therapist or when we're going to asking friends for help. And that's why I went and, proposed it at our meeting.
Oh, it's funny. What was one of the first things that you said after she talked about it? You were talking about
Suicide.
And checking in.
Oh, sorry. I'm usually talking about suicide, or I'm trying to keep it light.
Yeah.
Suicide considered. Yeah, checking on your strong friends. It's so important. I think checking on your strong friends is not something that we do a lot because we're validifying ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
We're constantly showing up, dressed, eyelashes in check, hair did, and it's very difficult when you're in a professional setting to know that you're falling apart inside, but you have to save face, and then you say to yourself, well, I'll just fall apart when I get home. Keep all that trauma nice and locked in.
Oh.
We'll let that out in a bad relationship another time.
Well, we have all of those friends and colleagues and family members that just don't have their life together. And they're it's all over their face, whether, they can help it or not. And a lot of times we kind of look at that, how are you doing? Are things okay? Tilting the head, yeah, of course. Just want to check in on you. Meanwhile, then you've got that friend who looks like they've got it all together, and they do have the lashes and the hair done, and they kind of never break. And inside, they're,
but
they
then
have
they're
just as many
screaming
problems.
at their employees, or they're having, divorces, or, things are breaking down. They're just not breaking down in front of you. And certainly not in front of their, like on stage or on television. I think about all of the poor journalists that have had to witness what it's gone through, not just the pandemic, but the civil unrest. And it's been horrific what's going on in Ukraine. And then they have to show up like looking so great, like, hi, everybody. Like that voice you do. What's that other voice you do,
my fake voice that I do?
Kimberly.
Kimberly.
Share it with the audience.
My Kimberly voiceover. Yeah, so I have before done voiceover work, and shout out to Babies R Us. Because
Gone
that was
not forgotten.
Right, that was a thing, and so I would read something, about, it was Toys R Us baby fair, to use that fake voice, because there's a buy one, get one sale on diapers, 50% off cribs. Yeah.
For all of you listening, that is actually Kelly Jordan.
That's my fake voice, and which sounds nothing like my regular voice. But yeah, it's, people put that fake voice on and keep going. So we discussed at our meeting how important mental health topics are. And every single one of these podcasts so far, at the very end, I ask everybody what they would like to hear us talk about. And every single show, pretty much, someone's mentioned mental health.
Yeah. Well, I like to read something, but not in your voice. I don't have that great voice that Kelly has. And this is from a book that I just finished reading this weekend. I have no idea what the impact of relating my personal experience will be in my professional life, but whatever the consequences, they are bound to be better than continuing to be silent. Dr. Jameson. And the book is An Unquiet Mind, and I highly recommend it because here is a psychologist who's working at Johns Hopkins having to share all about being a manic depressive, and really in the field, because I work with doctors of psychiatry and therapy, it is not welcome to actually say that you might have had these disorders. It doesn't bode well maybe if the patient finds out. But this woman in particular just said, listen, I know I could be a greater asset than I would to just be quiet about it, because if somebody shares their own personal experiences, that dialogue then can continue, right? And it is so difficult, as we've all witnessed with all of these different celebrities, all the unfortunate deaths we keep hearing about, even this weekend, right? That we have to keep hearing about people being tortured with mental health issues, and thinking that they have to show up looking good and showing up strong or whatever it is when people are dying inside. And I remember my husband asking me if it was a good idea that I would share my experience in addiction and depression before I released my book about mental health. And I said, well, absolutely, it would be a good idea. It might not be a good idea for everybody else to hear, the professionals that I work with, but I could no longer myself go on in business not being able to be my full self when witnessing so many other people suffering,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It makes people comfortable, too, I think, to hear these stories, even if the stories themselves are uncomfortable subjects, because it does show that, I look at both of you, you both look incredibly beautiful and well put together, and you're very well spoken, but you've also been very open about your experiences, and not everybody is comfortable with that. Sure. And some people might say, maybe you shouldn't share your experiences. But we have to get to a point where that's normal. And we have to normalize that, because it really does show that not everything is as perfect as you see on Instagram, or, we did one of these podcasts about, social media and how everything is so perfect and filtered, and, you only post the good stuff. And then there are the people who post everything and maybe overshare a little bit, but, there also should be okay to have that happy medium. And whether it's in your personal or professional life, we are who we are because of our experiences. And why not we should be sharing them.
Exactly. And I think too, people need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think as I grew in my professional, capabilities and in my professional career, and I'm still very young, and just to give, the audience some context, I had experienced severe child abuse from 0 to 19, whether that was physical, emotional, mental, and I kept it all in. And I told myself, if I were to work hard, if I were to get an education, it would give me opportunities. Thank God it did. However, I compartmentalized, and I kept it pushing. And I got to law school. I'd graduated so many things early, and I got to law school, and I was working on a master's at the same time. And it's so weird when your body is detached from that abuse, and you get to this point in your life where no one's hurting you anymore. No one's making you feel less than. and I have everything going for me. And then finally, that's when my body told me, Sophia, we have to deal with little Sophia. We have to deal with your inner child. And that's when I started having nightmares, and I started having to deal with things in my life. And I'd always written poetry to like cope with the things in my life, and I was never trained by anyone. Nobody knew I was writing poetry. Frankly, it wasn't even good. But I was writing poetry in law school, and it wasn't until I went to go self-publish one of my books of poetry on Amazon and donate the proceeds that I had my mentors in law school, who these people are attorneys. They're literally practicing attorneys and in the higher education field. And once again, that face validity. I'm thinking there's nothing wrong with them, because even in the legal field, still to this day, we are being told, you know, keep it to yourself. If you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with anxiety, you know, it's this double-edged sword. It's this like, keep it to yourself. But now, you know, it's 2022. So we're trying to convince people to go get mental health help, as we should, but we're still telling people, keep it to yourself. And it finally was that moment where I had told my mentors that I looked up to that they too had experienced things I had experienced. And I think that that's when I realized I like my people broken. I like my people who have experienced things. And I think the older I got, the more that I was impressed with people who had experienced less. Okay. And who hadn't experienced this perfect cookie cutter life. And I think when we come to terms with the fact that we are going to have people in this life who have experienced their own trauma, and pain is relative. The pain you've experienced, the pain I've experienced, the pain you've experienced is all different, and our pain is relative. The moment that we realize that our pain is what makes us unique, and our pain is what is going to really keep us all, you know, together and human, that's when we can really move past with some of these issues and really make progress in mental health, and not some sort of, you know, sick performative stunt that we do on social media saying like, go get help.
Right.
Actually tell your friends to go get help. Tell your friends where are their resources. Does your friend know where to find a therapist? Do you know how to locate your therapist on your insurance? Do you know what's covered with your insurance? Have you sought out a therapist?
Yeah. I have a question for you. You mentioned that, you know, from a very young age up until you were 19, that you suffered at the hands of abuse for a very long time. And then you mentioned that you started writing poetry, I'm guessing in college. Did you write poetry earlier on? Was that something?
Yeah, so
okay.
During the abuse I did.
So during
too.
the abuse.
Yeah.
So was that an outlet for you? Was that kind of, you
Yes.
went that artistic route? Because, I mean, who knows? Our audience is probably people of our age, but when I heard that, it kind of struck a chord with me, because you said you kept it in, and you clearly just, you know, didn't talk about it, didn't do anything about it until later. Your body was like, yeah, we're going to talk about this and we're going to deal with this now. But you kind of put it all into, obviously, you know, school, success, career, focusing on that. But then there's the poetry that you were able, that was your outlet. Yeah. When did you start doing that?
Probably when I was like in middle school. I had a 7th grade teacher who was really big into creative writing. And I don't think she knew it at the time, but she was very big into project-based learning, and she was very big into do what you want to do. I think that she wasn't into standards of learning, which at the time I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, and she was very into straying away from the normal strands of education, and she would just let us creatively write. And I would sit there and I would creatively write, and she would tell us, she was like, I'm not going to read your writings. And she would give us time where she would just let us write. And I would sit there and I would write, and I would go home and I would write. And I wasn't necessarily, you know, detailing horrific acts of abuse, but it gave me this outlet to creatively write. And as I moved forward, I did my associate's degree when I was in high school. And in there, I had a college professor, and I took an elective in poetry. And I remember I was so blown. I just had to take it because it was, you know, it worked with my schedule. And she gave us an assignment. It was this free thinking, project-based learning assignment. And it was like, you know, go write poetry. You know, go do what you want to do. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm doing high school and this associate's at the same time. Let me just finish this. And once again, it gave me that freedom. And I was writing poetry on my own, but it gave me that structure and that freedom and someone to tell me this is an appropriate way to learn and have an outlet as well. And so I was just privately writing, and it wasn't until really when I was 20, 21 that I had even told my close friends that I had been writing poetry. And my poetry was all free form. And really, I wouldn't even say a lot of it was poetry. I think a lot of it, too, was like a lot of journaling and entries, because growing up, I was the oldest of 5 kids, and I had 2 siblings with disabilities. And I had never reported anything, because the thing is, when you're experiencing child abuse and domestic violence, we never want to put the onus on children, because you're sitting here and you're so scared and so fearful in that situation. And as a child, I always thought, if I make a report, what's going to happen to my 2 siblings with disabilities? Who's going to care for them if it's not me? Because I was caring for my siblings pretty exclusively. And so I sat there and I was like, you know what, just keep it pushing. And I remember at one of the very first jobs that I took out of my graduate degrees, our CEO asked us, you know, what was your greatest accomplishment before 18? And I looked at everyone and I said, you know, survival, and that I raised my siblings. But I think the reason why I chose poetry was because I could do it privately. I could write in private, and no one would find it. You know, granted, someone could turn my room upside down, but for the most part, I just kept it secretly. And if I was worried someone was going to find it, I would just burn a book or...
But then you went on to publish.
Throw it away. Well, I was able to publish because when I was in law school, no one could hurt me.
Yeah, because you were already out of that situation.
Yeah, I was out of that situation. No one could hurt me. I knew I was about to, graduate with my GED. And law school gave me so much freedom, so much free thinking. And it's so funny because now I'm in business development, and I feel like so many times people are like, why aren't you a practicing attorney? No shade, no tea to practicing attorneys. Not for me. Not my interest. But law school, for me as a woman, gave me so much freedom and independence, and it made me, especially as someone who had gone through so much abuse, it gave me the freedom to express my thoughts freely. And it made me feel powerful. It empowered me, whether it was negotiations, mediations, being able to get in front of a courtroom or say what I wanted to say. And so especially the law school I went to Ohio Northern University, my dean, my associate dean were so supportive of me. It really was such a great environment for me that it allowed me to feel safe to publish my writings. And I was like, what's someone going to do to me? Maybe it just made me emboldened.
I love it. Well, you're a published author.
I am, darling.
Let's talk about that.
Well, let's, and I'm so proud to listen to you share. I really am. Just like, even when you opened your mouth at the advisory meeting, all of us women, I think we were all like, who is that? Yeah. I want to know her.
Definitely.
What is this face validity thing? And, it's a big decision to publicly talk about this stuff. And I like that you made mention that it's not for everybody. It's certainly, we shouldn't pressure anybody. Although I've wanted to, secretly, I'm like, can I please put you on the microphone and tell that story because of the good that it ultimately does for others.
Yeah.
But it is so understandable when people aren't ready to do that. And, maybe people need to just share it privately or whatever. I also love the mention of therapy and getting outside help. But I also realize that that's not for everybody. And there are other resources besides that. And you spoke very eloquently just about writing, just about poetry. I've met, Instagram influencers that have 35,000 followers on, and these people got sober an opposite way that I would have. Well, the internet didn't exist then anyway, so I'm just showing my age. But it was a big decision for me to do it. But I remember after I finished the book, and I checked into the Hilton in Clearwater Beach, and I brought my parents, and we went for a spa day, and I was just crying, uncontrollably crying. Of course, she was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, my life will never be the same again.
Because you just told your story.
Because I just told it. And so, because for so long, people Well, nobody could believe. The ones that didn't know couldn't believe. They were like, oh, my God, I would have never guessed. I would have never known. I would have never thought. I would have never. Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I think especially working with, physicians for the last 20 plus years. So, but a lot of how I was able to do what I did was because of the trauma that I had lived through. So you find a place inside of yourself to bury that, but it does come out and it seeps into other areas of our lives. Mm-hmm. So, and it wasn't, I was 25 years sober when I wrote the book. So I waited. I wasn't going to write something, like, hey, I'm 5 minutes sober and I don't want to kill myself today. Let me write a book. But my depression was so deep and so dark at such an early age that I thought, well, I was 21. I'm going to be 50 in October. I know that there are a lot of people that struggle just like I did, especially as a young adult. Like the young adults actually are the ones I'm the most concerned about because it's such a trying time and people go to college and they leave their homes and it was such a trying time for me that, there has to be an example of hope. Mm-hmm. So what was more important? Me maybe being embarrassed for a few minutes and mentioning smoking crack? I had to throw that in for you. I love it. Or knowing that I could help somebody else. And that can get a little cliche, right? Everybody, well, if I can help one person, I say it all the time because I mean it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the reward in that is better than any financial success that I could have ever gotten. But I think that it is important when we do speak about these things. Like I've gotten the help myself. I've been working on self for a very long time. And that's not to say that I am cured or better. It just means that I have gotten a lot of help. So I wouldn't talk about it unless I was doing the work myself, and I think that that's important. But there are many people that I know that stand up and do a lot of things, and it was definitely one of the pushes that made me, well, I remember the day exactly when I realized I should write the book because I was doing something, that I thought I would never be able to do, knowing where I came from in my career.
What was the thing?
Well, I was just...
I'm like, I got to know now.
I was, without saying all the detail, I was moderating a big event, and there were literally it was all doctors and me on a panel, and there were a lot of very influential people in the room. And I was looking in the audience knowing that, this person here had a family member die by suicide. This person's child had overdosed, and this, and I was just watching, and I just said it out loud for the first time. I was like, well, we're all going to talk about how, preventative mental health measures here, and here are the doctors, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, I'm 25 years sober and wanted to kill myself at 21. And just kind of was like,
there you go. You let it out.
It's out. Mm-hmm. And now, now I can write about it.
Did it feel so good when you said that?
It felt so good. Just because I've always wanted to live a life where I didn't have to hide anything, because when you have to hide so many things, it's just, it eats you up inside. Mm-hmm. So it was a very healing process. And I would say writing my book, I relived a lot of my trauma, but I had support around me and things came out that I never thought I would feel again. Because I think some people, I'm a solution strategist, it's on my business card. So I live in a solution. But unless we heal the problem, it's very difficult to get to that solution. So I repressed a lot of stuff because it was too painful to relive. But all of that has enabled me to even be more vulnerable or more daring or put myself out there more. And also be very just aware that other people might not be ready and be cool with that, just be or when I see somebody that is going to share a stage and I know what just happened, it was very traumatic, and I'm like, oh, I think maybe a little healing first, So I'm an advocate of getting some help.
Therapy is amazing.
If you're not getting help today, there's something wrong with you. Right. I'm switching it up.
And help is actually pretty readily available nowadays. Yes. At least it's starting to become. It used to be a lot more difficult. And even with the pandemic, now there are more mental health resources because we were so closed off and because, we lived through unprecedented. Think about how many times we heard that over the course of, 2 years. And for a while there, I was really tired of living in basically like a history book where I felt like every single day there was some major, huge historical event. Yes. And I'm like, can we just have normal life for a little while versus, oh my gosh, we have, you know, a crazy, real big global pandemic. Oh, okay. Well, we just, you know, it was like, oh, every year was just like, hold my beer. I'm going to top this. And, you know, then we had the, you know, January 6th run on the Capitol building. As someone who lived 2 blocks behind the Capitol building, that was insane for me to watch on TV from my living room. I'm just like, oh my God, think about everything that has happened and all of that, how it affects all of us. And for those who don't talk about it and who aren't comfortable and who are, I've got to be perfect and I've got to, you know, make sure that I look like I have my life together, absolutely, and let everyone else think that I have my life together. You know, how do you just take that next step to say, okay, maybe I'm not okay? How do you know, I mean, you started with the poetry and then going to school and putting yourself in there. You know, I mean, you're like, hey, I'm gonna better myself by getting sober and doing all of these things. And then that day when you were like, I need to tell my story to everyone who will listen, so you can make that difference. How would you, if you could give someone advice who's listening to this right now, who's saying, oh my God, yes, except for I don't know how to, I don't write poetry and I don't plan on writing a book.
Right. I think, so let me speak for young adults first, because that's my demographic, and then kind of branch out from there. For those that are in undergraduate programs or graduate programs, really, really look at the resources that are available on your campus. I wish when I was an undergrad, someone would have sat me down and told me that there were free resources, because at that time I was still, you know, at 19, I was still experiencing abuse. So 17, 18, when I'm in college, I'm experiencing abuse. I'm not realizing that these undergraduate campuses have all of these resources. They have departments. They have a Title IX department. They have victim advocates. They have mental health resources. They have the little, you know, safe spaces you can go to hang out. I had no idea about that. And I was in a sorority. I was sitting there. I was playing a sport. I had no idea about any of that. So I would say go out to your undergraduate and see what resources are on campus, because oftentimes they're free, or they can get you clued in with someone who's free. For those in graduate programs, I would say the same. For me, my law school, so I had originally gone to a law school in Florida and transferred to ONU. And the first thing they did in my orientation is they brought out the school therapist. And at the time,
that's awesome.
Yeah. At the time, I was sitting there and I was like, oh, I don't need that. I contacted this man 6 months later. You're like, I kept the card. And I remember sitting there.
What made you do that? What made you finally reach out?
I was struggling. And I think when you've experienced severe trauma, and I was in a place in my life where I felt safe, I felt like no one was going to hurt me. It was when I finally had to deal with like inner Sophia, that inner child trauma. And that's when I started really dealing with horrible effects of my PTSD. And I sat there and I was like, I need help. I don't feel comfortable going to my parents' insurance because I had dealt with childhood abuse. And so I sat there and I was like, what can I do? I felt super hopeless. And then I sat there and I remember I was like, you know what? My law school deans brought out this therapist from campus who told us it would be completely free and confidential if we went to him. And so I swallowed my pride at the time, because in that moment I thought, okay, if I go, is someone going to know? Is someone going to find out? At the time I was like top 10 in my law school class. I was like, no, people are not. It was the face validity. I was like, I'm putting on a show every day. For so long, I thought I was like a show pony. I was like, I'm doing the song and dance from 9 to 5. Got my little brooch on, and I'm doing great. I'm doing great in class, and I'm doing a master's at the same time. And I would go home, and I would sit there, and I would be panicking, and I would be dealing with severe PTSD of the abuse that I experienced. And I remember I literally found this man's business card, and I sat down in this man's office, and he had this 1,000-piece puzzle. And in law school, you have case books. So I was sitting there, and I was like, the irony that I closed a 1,000-page case book to look at a 1,000-piece puzzle. And wait for this therapist. And, you know, I ended up going to a few therapists, and I think that's something, too, that we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. The first therapist you go to may not be a good match, and you need to be comfortable with that. Keep going.
Yeah, it's not therapy that's right. It just might not be the right person for you. Right. Exactly. But there's a different person out there. There are many other people out there.
Exactly.
So don't stop until you find the right person.
My other piece of advice, keep going until you find the right person, and don't give up after the first time or the second time or the third time. And it's incredibly hard telling your story. It really is. And if somebody doesn't believe you the first time, and this is where I talk about face validity, first couple therapists I went to, they were like, Sophia, maybe you're just dealing with lonely at the top syndrome. Like, that's not a disorder.
Lonely at the top syndrome. Yeah.
I'm not Kanye West.
Right. right.
He's lonely right about now.
And he needs some serious therapy. Oh, my God.
So for young adults, that's my big advice. Go seek out resources. There's many programs online where you can go try to see if they'll take, if you're not making a certain income threshold, see if you're on your parents' insurance, see if there's Teladoc. Keep going. Your first therapist name may not be the right match, and trust the process.
God, I couldn't agree more. And it's hard, you touched on you were doing amazing. Everyone's telling you you're basically so incredible. Look at how successful you are in school, and you're gorgeous, and you're the shit. Why would anything be wrong? Why would you need to go and take that step to go to therapy? But you knew inside, you're like, I mean, we should all have someone to talk to. I mean, we can vent to our friends, but I mean, I said it on another podcast that I was not, I don't have a whole lot of people that ask about how I'm feeling.
Right.
Because I appear to have my shit together.
Right.
So like, no one's like, Kelly, are you okay? Or I seriously, I have friends that I don't know that I have family. I don't think they know what I do for a living, because they're like, oh, Kelly's okay. She's always okay.
Right.
She's not calling. I'm not posting that I'm having a terrible day on Facebook, and that, I'm not posting. I'm not telling my family. I'm not telling my friends. I used to be really bad. I've gotten a lot better at it, about talking about how, whether I'm not happy or I'm happy, but it's hard to make that jump and say, I'm not okay. And it's hard to kind of do that, or I'm going to go to therapy. I do need help. I need to talk to someone other than just, my best friend or my dog or,
Good dog, though.
a strain. It's like I've had people talk to me and tell me bad things that have happened to me in like the subway, because I moved here from DC, and where I just kind of look like, hey, talk to me. And it made them feel better. I could tell, I'm like you, where Sharon, want to help people. I would love to do that. But that first step is really hard.
And it's hard when people are telling you there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there telling one of my friends at the time, because she was like, no, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're top 10% of your master's and you're top 10 of your law school class. Nothing wrong with you. And I literally looked at her and I was like, there's something fucking wrong with me. I was like, I'm literally doing all of this. I'm going for a walk at night, looking at my law school going dum-de-dum-de-dum, and I can't turn my mind off. My music is blaring at full blast, and I can hear my mind like going tick-tock, tick-tock. If I were to get drunk right now, I would still hear my mind. So, no, there's something fucking wrong with me.
I love it.
I have to say, I love how sometimes when you introduce yourself, the first thing you say.
Not everybody loves that.
But that you say, you're like, so I'm a recovering crack addict. It's like, oh, well, shit, okay.
Nice to meet you, Sharon.
Nice to meet you. I don't think I've ever met one like you before. That's great. I'm so excited, Wow, they do exist. You're like a unicorn. But it's it should be, we've got to figure out a way to make this normal.
But we are right now.
I hope so.
We're trying to normalize this, right? That is the goal. If the only way to normalize anything is to talk about it. And the hardest thing, I think, in life is for people to just communicate. Like I always say, even in business, I will say to one of my doctors, if there's some bad news I have to tell them or whatever it is, I go, okay, this is going to be really difficult, but we're going to get through this together. And it's going to be painful, and you're going to be mad. I'm going to ask you to just chill until I get to the end of this conversation with you, and then we will finalize it, and we'll figure out a solution. It's always difficult, but nothing actually can heal if it's not spoken about. You have to speak about it, you know? And I think I will just say kudos to you for talking about, you know, what kids should do on campus. I mean, I had an hour conversation with a college student not too long ago that was having a really hard time, and we were talking about those resources. I think mental health in the workplace, this is May that we're doing this recording, so it is the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month. This probably won't come out in May, but it is so important in the workplace too. So bringing in a speaker, I've gone in and been the speaker. It's great. I love that. But as I'm walking out with my check, I'm like, well, that's not going to work. You know, because one talk isn't enough. You know, so it has to be a part of the culture. It has to be spoken about. We have to do work. We have to have workshops. We have to have a safe space for people to share. And usually that happens, or always, I like to say usually, but actually it's always, it happens from the top down. So if the top is talking about it, it will leave a safe space for everybody to share. So sometimes it's really good to actually come undone. So I like to come undone with people that are uncomfortable coming undone to make it okay, to not be okay, right? Because we really do have to be okay, not especially today. Lord, we have been through some stuff as a globe. But then imagine every individual in the world is going through something. So a safe space to share it. So thank you for having this conversation today. It's been, you know, I feel great. I don't know about anybody else listening or watching, but I feel pretty damn good to be having this conversation. Positive toxicity is real, though. I will end that. It is real. I am a very positive person. Like, it's annoying. People tell me how annoying it is. I wake up, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to work out, and I like eat right, and I'm like healthy, and I'm going to laugh, and I'm going to sing. Yeah, it's true. I am happy. But that's because I do a lot of work on myself, and I don't ignore the hard stuff. Hard stuff can actually bring you to a really positive place. Yeah. So I will end with that. Thank you, Kelly Jordan.
I love that. Well, we've talked a lot about this. Any other lasting comments, Sophia?
I will say with the workplace, and where's the camera? There's the camera. Stop doing performative things. It's one thing to bring a speaker in, and it's another thing to actually make meaningful policy and directive change. And it's one thing to care directly about your people and to challenge policies you haven't changed since 2001. I really think that we need to challenge our corporate policies. We need to challenge those who are in managerial roles in our organizations and really think about mental health as a whole. Telling employees, telling our underlings to take PTO as a form of mental health. That is not an answer. I don't know who started pushing that.
Yeah, that was...
You shouldn't have to use your PTO as a mental health catch-up.
Think of it as physical health, people.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah. You go on vacation, and then you come back, it's the same shit that's at work that you left there. Nothing's really changing by you just taking a week off.
Exactly.
So, yeah. No, God, you're so right with policy change. Real change. Affect real change. There's a reason why if you look at the companies that are the number one companies to work for, what do they all have in common? Their employees actually all say, wow, they really care about our mental health. They're doing things like therapy. They're doing mental health days. They're doing childcare. They're doing, they're going the extra mile for their employees. And that's why they're the best places to work, because they foster that type of environment. So when you have a problem, you feel like there's someone you can go to that you're comfortable with. So
I'd like to say one more thing to tie into that face validity jam that we've been talking about. The thing that you hear most when somebody dies by suicide or overdoses is, oh my God, I had no idea. I had no idea. They were so happy. I mean, they just posted today, because of the passing of Ashley Judd, an interview that she did with her daughter, where she literally looked like,
Naomi Judd.
Naomi Judd. Yeah. Sorry. Her, her apps, she was glamorous and gorgeous and happy, and now she's dead. That's the reality. So when we're talking about face validity, that is exactly what we're talking about. It is very easy, actually, to show up and look good.
It's funny. it's not funny. I've come a long way personally when it comes to mental health. I remember one of the first times, not the only time, that one of the first times I was old enough to really understand, when my mother had tried to commit suicide. She was not successful. I remember being so angry at her and telling her, you have 6 children. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you would even consider doing that because you have 6 children. And that was kind of my knee-jerk excuse, like, what do you have to be so upset for? You know, you should just be living for your children. And that is so wrong, because that's terrible to say that and to think that, because this is mental health is people, we treat it so different than cancer or any, it's almost like, oh, it's not physical, it's just fake or something, and then it comes to,
just your brain.
It's just right. It's just your brain. But,
brain
we need to change that thought of, we need to support each other and realize that it's an illness. It should be treated like any other illness and not just, oh, that's just you getting in your head and you being selfish. And it's the ones a lot of times that oh my God, I had no idea. I had a colleague and a friend of mine take his life last year and last February. And there were so many people who were like, oh my gosh, Brian was, the most fun and outgoing, and you would have never thought anything was wrong. Yeah, the last 6 months he kind of became a little bit recluse, just kind of thought it was the pandemic. And it's like, no, he actually did talk on occasion about his mental health issues to certain people. Not everybody, but certain people. But, he lost his life to that illness.
Yes.
Yes, he took his own life, but he lost his life to that illness. And talk about face validity. He could have been a poster child for it.
All the ones running through my head.
On Instagram, on Facebook, and yet you can see the decline. It's funny, it's terrible, but you can see the decline where all of a sudden he stopped posting those things.
Yeah.
And maybe people just go, oh, I guess he's just not, again, pandemic, not as many, trips to Key West or those, all the fun stuff that he would do. But we have to, like you say, check in on people and support them when they do go through something like this.
Exactly.
Support is the best. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist at all.
Don't want to be.
Yeah. But I'm here if anybody needs to talk about anything, and I think that's the best thing that we can do. Yeah. And resources. You talked about, Sophia, about sharing resources with folks because they're out there.
And we have the Crisis Center here in Tampa Bay, and we have NAMI, and we really do. We have so many resources that we could probably have. Well, they're in the show notes, I'm sure. We'll make sure that people have a place to go and resource. But I'd like to honor your space momentarily, and thank you for dropping that trauma bomb. You think I didn't notice that you just dropped that little trauma bomb right there on the show?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for being
oversharing a little bit.
Oversharing is good.
Yeah,
it's
whatever.
a safe space.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
If want to leave you both with what is another subject that you would like us to talk about on this podcast?
I got to think about it. I think I'll have to disassociate at a chamber meeting.
Yeah. Bring it back. I love it.
I'll walk in late and be like, hey, got another topic.
Actually, I got another topic for you, and we'll be doing it next week. Got it.
I think I think it was mentioned in the podcast show I heard with Amanda recently. And that was about just like being the only woman in the workplace or the only Black woman at the table. More diversity and inclusion. I think that those topics are so important. I think that we're in a space right now where me as a white woman needs to share that seat at the table and invite 19 other of their great friends to join, because I don't think that it's easier to say those things. It's easy to say, let's include everybody, but there's an action that comes right after that. So I'd like to hear more about that, Kelly.
It's great. Let's do it.
Kimberly.
Right. My fake voice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Diapers are
We
still
appreciate
half
you.
off.
Cheers to Baby Zora.
Cheers. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Second Soul Studios.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
You guys are
appreciate you.
amazing.
Second Soul Studios is a full-service production studio with capabilities for photo, video, podcasting, editing, co-working, and more. Our photo-video studio has a number of different backdrop choices and props to choose from. We also have a gourmet kitchen set, or if you're an upstart podcaster, you'll love our 4-person podcast studio. So what are you waiting for? Visit secondsoulstudios.com to book a tour today.